Greetings, all praise be King. Today we're speaking of the common law system, alternatively called monkey rule. It is a form of monopoly law controlled by a few hands. Now this system has its origin in the ancient region of Babylonia, to be carried through the Antichrist to Rome and on to the European nations, which brought it to this region of the planet to assist in its slave driving operations. This is borrowed from the civil rule. A fancy name for such a corrupt way. There are different forms of law. Just because you may have been born in one country or another, it doesn't make you necessarily subject to that rule. Even the Christ had stated to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. In the book of Revelation, this rule is spoke of as a beast having 10 horns and many crowns. That these world powers work together. Their role is to become the Christ. They seek to be the Messiah to all. This is a false Christ, and yet it is still a messianic complex they suffer from. In the book of Revelation, the peoples give power unto this beast, having many tongues, to speak in many languages, to sell its goods to the victim. If you are in a dark alley and a masked thug jumps out of the shadows and puts a knife to your throat and says, "Give me your wallet," you may give it to him, yet you don't agree. And if he had not jumped out of the shadow or put a knife to your throat, you may have kept your wallet. Similarly, by the force of these satanic powers, our populations have been driven to give up their goods, which would be their freedoms. And those freedoms now give power to these monkeys. Now they build their big mansions, travel around, stay here, stay there, hire prostitutes, porn stars, and basically act like diseased animals. This is a result of this structure of rule. That is why the Christ came. Not just to abolish man's way, yet to establish highway for eternity. Now, just as many of man's ways are a function of deceit, so is the common law rule. Another form of wizardry. Whereas it functions by looking at separate cases, often referred to as case study. And in this, there is particular trial, and there's an outcome. The outcomes are then what is used as the equipment to carry this rule forward. As we recall, the dragon gives power unto the god beast, the rule of man, and this token of Caesar is used to push this rule towards that direction. So this being representative of the dragon, Satan. Even the Christ had stated, whose image and superscription is on this coin, because this was the idolatry that even Jehovah had condemned in the old days. So now today, not only has Caesar been placed upon the coin, yet many other figures. And to add insult to injury, Frederick Douglass has stated, man seeks to take the role of the Christ, that is the Messiah, for all to come and worship at his feet. Man speaks in many tongues. This rule has reached out amongst many nations, states. There is maybe a few states that have not adapted. That is why they are terrorized. So these outcomes are essential to this rule because they're used in further cases. This is kind of standard definition of this common law. What separates this from its daddy, the civil rule. Both part of the monkey family, yet one an orangutan and the other an ape. If you go to the law library, there's more written than any one man could comprehend. This is to exclude people from knowing, making it difficult for people to practice that which is supposed to be good. when you find cases, they now could be presented in a trial to show the outcome of a previous situation of similarity. See, it has to be a case that's a similar situation, and therefore the judge's rule is deemed as valid. So the attorney's job is to find these cases, is to defend. Unfortunately, for those that do not possess the wealth of satanic merchandise, this is not so simple. What these monkeys seek is for you to agree. If you go to a trial, and I have one next week, set for next week, in which I'm gathering as much information to be able to share. This is a second jury selection. The first one finished in a mistrial because of a technical difficulty. The recording devices weren't working. After the jury was selected, that the defendant myself was satisfactory with. Of course, I, a member of the tribe of Levite, have chosen to represent myself. You are able to act as your own lawyer. For who says that you can't? If the Babylon said, nope, you have to get a lawyer, well then you would have to have some money, even because their court-appointed lawyers cost you. It's the same argument with free speech, where how would they tell people that they do not have a right to free speech? I mean, what would that sound like? So, of course, they're going to say people have a right to free speech. But as in my case, when you go to minister at a state college, the police could arrest you, and it's your word against theirs. They could make any claim. The police are not obligated to tell the truth. This is why, if you decide to stand up against injustice, the police will come and tell you, no, you can't. You can't use that bullhorn. You can't stand there. You can't talk in public. Does that mean that you can't? You still can, but maybe they'll arrest you. Now, when you get arrested, all the circumstances are different. This case was a second-degree misdemeanor. The defendant, myself, was taken to the long-term jail facility, stripped of his clothes forcefully twice for not removing the head covering, put into the suicide cell for no other reason other than something to do with non-compliance. Held for days, and then offered to have the charges dealt with for $200 and time served. So my decision, being not guilty and knowing how this case rule works, whereas if you take these pleas, that's what they're attempting to give you, to make an agreement to say that you're guilty, then they can keep you from going onto, for example, the State College campus because you agreed. So instead, they force you to go to court every month. This incident was about 6 months ago. It's been about 6 or 7 court appearances. Drive, half an hour, for example, back and forth. You got a business, shut it down. You got work, you got to try to call off. You got to call up every week on Tuesday to report in. And they threaten you with jail time. Whereas they say if you take this to jury, then I may impose jail time on you, the judge. If you allow myself to handle the case or take a plea, then you will receive no jail time. So the incentives are there to take the plea, to make the agreement. And that is why this monkey beast has been successful in gaining power, because the more people agree, the more powerful it becomes. And if you go to the court and you observe those people waiting, you'll see most of them will say, hey, no contest, not guilty. No contest or guilty. Seldom do you hear not guilty. Sometimes, if you take the case to trial, it will be dropped. There was a marijuana charge here in this county, run by the sheriff, Clint Eastwood type. Goes on national news, talks about marijuana is a dangerous stepping stone. He or the case was a marijuana charge. It was dropped. It was a simple marijuana. Right now, there are certain cases such as marijuana that they may be reluctant to go forward with. If it's over a certain amount, they can charge you with a felony, and what they'll do is they'll drop the charge to a misdemeanor in an effort to get you to plea. If you decide not to, they say, oh, we're going to charge you with a felony, which may result in prison time. So normally they'll say, well, you can give us a couple hundred today and agree with the charges, or you may be facing prison. So only an incompetent person would choose to take it to trial. Sometimes you got to get crazy with these people. Now, there's a line, because if you say the wrong thing, and they will try by asking questions to see, to gauge your competence level. If they determine you to be incompetent according to their criteria, they will strip you of any right that they claim you had. They are able to take you to the hospital whenever they basically decide, and what they call a Baker Act, and they can hold you indefinitely. So you do not want to be labeled incompetent. This is the most convenient way for them to discredit your testimony. They did it to the Christ. They did it to John the Baptist. An agreement can be made by using the following words: yes, okay, all right, sure, I guess so, or maybe that's the questionable one. You get the point. We are trained to deliver these answers. When you are on the screen and there's a notification, it's going to say okay. Yeah. It sometimes doesn't give you any other option, but sometimes it'll say a little box like tell me more, you know, and somebody's busy, they don't want to hear, you know. People hit okay. We're programmed. This is the natural, or the reactory response. Once the button is pressed, there's an agreement that was made. So, for example, they're going to tell you there's cookies on the computer, a fancy term for trackers or monitoring agents. Sounds like real innocent. Oh, who doesn't like cookies? Okay, now you're being tracked. Now what they say is, oh, so many people agreed with being tracked. There's no problem with it. And now who will retain the power? It's the same in the court, where they ask you a question. Do you understand? Well, what are they saying? Do you stand underneath me? You say no. If you are forced to sign some paperwork, say to get out of jail, you put on it no consent. Or you could put not my signature. I think that's one I'm looking at using next. Something to that effect. Yeah. Maybe according to their monkey rule, that still counts. Either way, it don't look good for them. Really, no is more of a powerful word than people realize. Some social scientists say that yes is the most pleasant word for people to hear. Perhaps them. When we are encountered by the beast,